Garrett, thank you for joining me for this. I'm really excited to dig into this. It's something that we've been talking about doing for a while, so let's jump right in.
Let's do it. Thanks, James.
Okay, we're going to cover some of the challenges with kicking off a campaign to illustrate how we work, how we approach a link building campaign, and to help hopefully inform decisions you're making around link building as well. And we're going to start with using e-commerce as our example today. So I've got Garrett French, our founder, of course, of Citation Labs, and I'm excited to jump in and have this conversation. And we're going to record this and have some slides as breakout as well after, so you can really dig into this as much as it's helpful to dig into. And so we're going to be talking about e-commerce, sales page, link building, and we're going to cover these 4 areas. We're just going to sort of touch on the last one. We're going to focus mostly on the first 3.
Yep.
And so just to set the stage, Garrett, this is sort of what we're often met with when someone's looking for link building services. Sometimes we get a high level priority, like in our example here, IKEA, not a client, just a brand that we like, and of course, e-commerce. Maybe they would come to us in this hypothetical scenario and say, we want to improve organic visibility for sofas pages, and maybe they give us an idea of budget. So that's pretty much it. Then we take it from there, and the first thing we do is we start digging into those pages. What are the potential pages to determine viability? And then we jump into the results of that analysis. We call it a link gap analysis, which will help us inform which pages go into a campaign and what the budget is needed for that. So we're looking to identify essentially what the largest impact of a campaign is. This is the starting point for that, which is digging into some of their page-related data. And we need this for our internal link gap analysis process, because we're going to pull the competitors for the ranking keywords for these pages. This is our first analysis, and this usually goes through a number of revisions. This helps us start to identify the potential pages for a campaign. And so with that hypothetical feedback from IKEA, I went to SEMrush, and that's where this data came from. Went to SEMrush, exported all the pages, did some filtering and searches for sofas. And this first one, when you and I looked at it, Garrett, it was a little bit of a miss because it's really kind of heavy on sectionals.
That's it.
And this often happens. We go through a few iterations, as of course but the first one was a little less focus on sectionals and a little more focus on sofa types.
Yeah.
And so this was the revised version of this. There are a number of kind of categories or sofa types that we identified here, and we picked these 3 pages to go further and deeper into the analysis. Now we're coming out of the data set because we've got really good data here in terms of knowing what our domain gaps are. We don't always have gaps, but this is our main backlink quantity metric. So we look at referring domains from the competition and referring domains from each of the subject pages, and then we dig in on a couple of other levels as well. This is SEMrush's organic difficulty score, which is logarithmic. So these are all highly competitive terms that we're using in the analysis. That was an important call out. And we also look for other factors like page authority. This is a great kind of compensating factor that may indicate, okay, we don't necessarily need to close.
Yes.
We don't need to build 772 links to this particular page from unique domains in order to be top of mind. We look for any signals that would essentially allow us to discount the number of links we recommend building for the pages.
And for our first one here, we have no domain gap.
So no domain gap, right, which is often a scenario. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. That could be because we're competing against profiles that are fresher, and that's why they're not ranking where they want to be. They're not going to be happy with a rank of 21. It could also signal some other things. Maybe the content isn't fully aligned with the keywords that are in the analysis, et cetera. But yeah, one of the keys here is there's no gap on this one, but in a lot of cases, an outdated profile will perform less well over time, essentially, and there's a reason to come back in and build additional links. In the next iteration of this tool, which we're getting ready to launch pretty soon, it factors in a average age of referring domains, that sort of thing. So we get some additional views into this, but you're right, there's no gap in this one. But since there's so much volume in this, almost 4 times the next page that we chose, I didn't want to discount it altogether. And clearly there's opportunity here because it's ranking in position 21 on average. So next is, I'm going to turn it over to Garrett, and we're going to jump into just one of the pages. For the sake of brevity, we're going to just choose one of these pages to really do a deep dive into. And so Garrett, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Great. Thank you, James. So we have really explored contextualization thinking about how are sofas contextualized, or how could we contextualize them on other websites? What kinds of citable elements are existing? What kinds of citable elements would be nice to add? And so for this, we also have to think about, what does our link gap look like, right? Because the how high are we jumping, right? Like, how many links do we need to build? Because that's going to kind of have to inform as well, what kinds of concepts are we coming up with? What kind of volume do we need to build for a given page? So this is one where we'd be doing kind of a refresh of the existing links, so that we can basically drive more traffic to this particular page, to the main sofa category page. So we started with asking this question: what are sofas in the IKEA context? And that was a page level evaluation that we did. Okay. Now, one lovely thing they had pre-existing on the page is designing your own sofa. All right. So this is a nice, really wonderful capability to offer consumers. Not everybody wants to. I don't want to design my own sofa. I want to look at it. I don't know how to do that, or how I would. What would happen if I made, if I change this or change that? I might not be comfortable anymore. I don't know. I don't want to mess with it. But some people are super confident about their design choices, and can kind of jump in there and would be comfortable taking a swing at that, which is great. It's pre-existing on the page, and this by itself is a highly citable element. This is worth discussing when discussing sofas, is that you can customize them. You can design your own at IKEA. Now, I'm sure there's parameters, and it's not like you can make one that's like a double-decker, triple-decker sofa or anything like that, right?
You think of the Lego movie here?
Yeah, totally. I love that. I love that movie.
Hey, will you define, as you go through these, will you define, just for anyone watching this, what a citable element is, just to make sure we're
great call out. Yeah. Thank you. So citable elements at Citation Labs, we talk about these data points or points of utility or sections of utility on a given page that are worth linking to, worth mentioning, worth citing off page, off site from this particular element. So it'll be something that's linkable, but that is a section of a larger page. Perfect. So this design your own sofa is that to a T on their sofas page.
Perfect.
So you see in the left column, we've got, the citable elements. In the right column, each bullet point is associated with the citable element to the left of it. So designing your own sofa, we're thinking about publishers potentially in the gaming space. If there were some cause for making an extreme sofa for somebody who's playing video games, it would have to be pretty extreme circumstances, I'm sure, but we could probably come up with something. It might be a slight gimmicky, but that's fun too. There's nothing wrong with a gimmick in link building. That could be one particular publisher type. Certainly though, interior design and decorating would be a vertical, both DIY stuff and professionals, where we'd want to be leaning into context or discussions around designing your own sofa. When do you need to do this? When would you want to design your own sofa? Who's doing this? What are you trying to match? Or, is this a decoration choice? Is this a design choice to better fit the space? Is this even a physiological choice to better fit the sitter? Lots of different ways to really think about and link to, lots of context from which to link to this capability of designing your own sofa, which again, pre-existing. So that's always our starting point at Citation Labs, what already exists on the page. Now, for this exercise, we went forward with really digging into what else could we add to this page, what could really make sense, and that opens up these publisher types or publisher opportunities for IKEA to build links to this particular page. So we had this notion or came up with this notion as well of getting cozy. What does cozy mean? And so this is one of those, it's highly subjective, obviously, but what if we layered in some coziness? We were able to come up with coziness metrics, right? Like what can increase my cozy level from a 7 to a 9? Like we really want to go super cozy. Is it just that fuzzy blanket, or is there some fabric that's super cozy that the sofa could be made of? What really creates that feeling of coziness. So if we have metrics that we came up with around that, well, that becomes something that's hyper citable, right? Like we really could discuss coziness in a lot of different contexts. Family and parenting publishers, for example. I would love if IKEA really came up with a coziness metric, or we did, and then tried to implement it with IKEA. We could explore reaching out to direct-to-consumer brands, pajamas, hot chocolate, blankets, pillows. They're going to be deep into coziness, right? Like that's going to be important to their brands and their brand experience. So now IKEA, we've worked with them to develop a coziness metric, so we could reach out to the hot chocolate folks and start talking about what does coziness really mean. All right.
Yeah.
Certainly mental wellness publishers are going to be more interested if we get into more the psychological side of coziness, because safety is probably really important for coziness to exist. And so oftentimes also coziness is a relationship related metric too. So there might be something that we could explore on the relationship side of things. So there's a lot there to unpack, but also as you unpack, you can think of different publisher types as well and different topics as you would kind of explore these spaces. Another kind of angle that I really think is important, especially for me, like I'm not good with design or decorating. Like it just doesn't come naturally to me. If I like it, I know it when I see it, but I also don't know how to make it. But one way to unpack that, I think, for me and perhaps other consumers is thinking about what are your feeling goals for a room? How do you want to feel in a space? How do you want others to feel in a space? And I think that's a more practical way to kind of think through what sofas are doing, right? Like they're creating a feel in your space. And so if we had either a tool or a methodology for understanding your own personal feeling goals, this kind of content would fit obviously nicely on a sofa page, but then also would create another citable element for reaching out to, again, our wellness publishers, interior design and decorating. And then we could start thinking about first-time home buyers, right? Like people who have just bought a house and they're really, your first house is the one you want to get just right. You want to get all your houses just right, but it has the most meaning perhaps, and it's kind of an urgency. Now we have just old sofas. We don't buy new ones when we get a new house anymore, but anyways, then also moving companies. I could see, this notion of wanting to get your new space just right. Well, moving companies are constantly helping people move into new spaces. And so that might be an opportunity for IKEA there as well.
Yeah.
And this last one really for James and I, James, we really had a great discussion about this and even created a new slide and a new kind of link building direction. We started thinking about abilities and disabilities and different type of medical conditions that would necessitate different types of sofa design, right? Not just height and weight. For me at 6'1", like I do struggle to find great, I need lumbar support. I slouch. And so it's nice to have a pillow back there. And, if I had a sofa that I knew was really designed for my body type or really was a good fit for my body type, I'd love to be able to match that up. I just, at the sofa stores, they just don't really talk about that. It's not a normal thing to discuss, it seems like. Well, then, I was thinking about my 107-year-old grandfather. He's passed, but, he had trouble getting up out of chairs, right? Like at that age. So like, lifts are things that can be really helpful to folks. So, beginning to think about and unpack this idea around best sofas for your body type and that fit you. Well, we could get into specific medical needs, disabilities, spaces, nonprofits that help with disabilities and aging, and really help people make the fit, find just the right fit. Again, for that coziness, right? Like we can even layer coziness back into this, is really kind of having inclusive, cozy spaces. So this was this is what I love about link building is, and it's sofas are a very, for me, under-examined artifact of life. You just kind of expect them to be there and you don't really think too much about them. But when you begin to ask, well, how do we build links to a sofas page? You are forced into this place where you're asking yourself, what our sofas? How do we interact with them? How could we position them so that we can create relevance, so we can create off-site context, so we can think about what do we need to cite? What are the citable elements that would need to live on this page so that we can have these kinds of sofa-related discussions off-site? So that's what really pushes us and drives us at Citation Labs. So we did this kind of thinking for 2 other pages, and welcome you to visit with these pages in our slide deck. Have definitely thought it through further, but we want to, for the sake of a shorter video, not talk through both of these. But we do want to talk about this notion we came up with. Well, we didn't come up. We extended because we started asking and thinking about, wouldn't it be lovely if there existed, or we could grow the creation of a furniture accessibility rating system, like an evaluative system for how well will this sofa work for folks with particular types of disabilities. And this, to my knowledge, doesn't exist, or doesn't exist extensively. So we started poking around and did see that IKEA had worked with, disability accessory designers in the past. Out of Israel, actually, they had done a project in Israel, but we couldn't find signs of it still existing. So it's a little sad that it had passed along. But the idea here was, we could develop an accessibility framework. How do we evaluate and judge whether a sofa is going to be a good fit for a particular disability type? This would be similar to helping folks who have dietary restrictions look at a menu or navigate a menu. What really makes sense for my dietary restrictions on the menu? Well, sofas don't have that, incredibly, right? Furniture doesn't have that. Maybe it does, and I just don't know about it. But beds should have this as well. So anyhow, what could a framework look like? Well, that framework by itself, if you developed something that was genuinely useful, would be highly linkable, highly promotable all by itself. Secondarily, if you applied this framework to each one of your product lines, you could have citable elements at the individual product level, and then certainly at the category level as well. So we would, have citable elements that could live on the pages. The framework would be worthy of a press release, of reaching out to press who cover accessibility issues, reaching out to folks who have written about products that are designed specifically for folks with disabilities, or that enable accessibility into spaces or facets of life that are normally difficult to get into. We would be wanting to look at as well sponsoring organizations that also work with folks with disabilities, that focus on accessibility, possibly product design as well. This would be for more learning. This would be for distribution of content. And as a link builder, this would be for building links. We'd want to build links potentially from the thank you pages. We'd want to have the opportunity to talk about our mission on their websites potentially, and how we're working with their communities. We'd be looking for links from those as well. And we'd love to generate social shout outs as well. Further to this, we could look at thought leadership guest posting, where we're asking to publish on design blogs, accessibility related blogs, furniture designers, and senior care, and really kind of push this focus of accessibility, bring more attention to it, and build more links for ourselves. I think it could also be a successful podcast pitch as well, if we have the right spokesperson from IKEA to explore these kinds of topics, right? So we absolutely need a design, someone with a great design background, certainly someone who had worked extensively on building out the framework and felt passionate about these issues would be a great person to include, to have on that podcast. What I love though, James, is we came up with a citable element for the sofas page. And then from there, we spent 45 minutes fleshing this model out, because the more we thought about it, and the more we looked out there, it could be a perfect fit for a brand like IKEA. There's a heavy initial input, lots of research, lots of accessibility learning that you're going to have to do, and framework discovery. And maybe you can only come up with a framework for a particular type of furniture, not for all furniture all at once,
or all product types, right?
Yeah, no,
right.
There's a lot of complexity, but establishing a framework for evaluation of products in general, I think could be a wonderful thing, especially for enabling that inclusivity in your products. So that was our other big takeaways from this exploration, was that, you get down to the page level, and next thing you know, you're going wide again, right? We're reaching out to all accessibility kinds of, topic areas. And that's what happens when you think about building links to very specific pages. You kind of end up with, the micro view, but you can back out into macro concepts when you spend the time with those individual pages and ask, how are we going to build links to this particular, very specific sales page? This is why we've always, or why we've really focused in on sales pages. There's just so much opportunity there. So that wraps the kind of the ideation portion. What do we do next?
Thank you, Garrett, for that. That was a lot of great information. We're barely just touching the surface on what's involved with link building. So essentially, these are the areas that we talked about. And we mentioned publisher sourcing. We didn't really directly talk about it, but we started talking about the types of publishers that we would want to approach. And then there's an entire process around outreach development and all of these other things that go into that. But we really wanted to focus on these upfront areas because these are often the bottleneck. This is where I think a lot of potential campaigns get stuck and potentially never move beyond, because we can't quite figure out who we're going after, how many links we need, what sort of topics are we going to approach, and what do we need potentially to do to our page to make these pages more link worthy or citable. And so that's really what we wanted to demonstrate today. We're going to be covering other topics as well, so we'll have more of these coming out, and we'd love your feedback on how we can make our link building efforts better align with your goals. Thank you so much, Garrett, for breaking this down for us. It was very helpful.
My pleasure, James. Thanks for having me.
All right.